Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, my special guest this week is the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. What else? We're going to talk about his 2019-2020 budget, but we have some other issues I'm going to chat with the governor about, and then we're going to have two of the state's leading reporters. They're going to join us for the final segment of the program. As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, Governor Tom Wolf, welcome. The other day I was on a program, you know what I said? Tom Ridge. And then I said Tom Corbett. What's this? Every governor, it's Tom.
I know. I don't know why that is. That was always my name, though. So.
Yeah, I know. But it's easy to, you get all the Toms. All right, at any rate, Governor, look, you presented a budget. It didn't surprise me because when the Republicans got it in the legislature, many of them said this is a budget we can work with that didn't react negatively to the budget. And I thought there were many things that we're going to talk about, but two things sort of stuck out. One was workforce development, and the other one was your continued interest and the focus on education. Now, again, we want to talk about criminal justice, minimum wage. Sure. We're not going to have enough time to get through all of these. Right. But let's talk about, and here it is, the Keystone Economic Development and Workforce Command Center, and why you put this into the budget, and what's your concern about economic development?
Well, first of all, education and workforce readiness are parts of the same thing. And it is something that enjoys broad bipartisan support. There is not a Republican out there who doesn't want to make sure that we are filling all the jobs that we have available and that we have the right skills, matching those jobs. And there's not a Democrat out there that doesn't want the same thing. They want that for themselves. They want that for their children, grandchildren. And so this is something that really has brought people together, as it should. And again, I was saying, I think if we look at politics as basically trying to figure out how to address the real problems that real people in Pennsylvania face, it's things like this. How do we make sure that young couple trying to make the mortgage payments and the car payments, how do we make sure that they have a future, and that if they decide to have children, that their children are going to have a great future? And the central part of the key to that is making sure that we do what we need to do collectively to make sure that they have the right skills.
Yeah, but what's fascinating is that there are jobs available, but we don't have folks in the state who, I'll put it this way, are qualified or who have the training to do it. Welders, bricklayers, all kinds of jobs in technology. And I think if I understand the point you were making in your address, but also that you've made elsewhere, it's basically about getting those folks the proper training, and that's what labor and business working together on this economic development program is trying to achieve, or am I wrong about that?
No, you're absolutely right. And both labor and industry and business want the same thing. Yeah. The business does not want vacancies, and labor wants opportunities for workers, and this is where they both come together.
And one other aspect of it is it's business and labor working together, not apart.
That's right.
Not battling. I mean, there are differences, and we understand those, but this is to get folks to work together.
And this came about, as I mentioned in the speech, my middle class task force was chaired by the head of the AFL-CIO, Rick Bloomingdale. Right. And the co-chair was Gene Barr, who you're going to be talking to.
Yeah, he'll be on another program.
The head of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. And those two work together. And, initially you sort of say, well, these two don't have anything in common, but you start talking starting with workforce readiness, talking about infrastructure. There are a lot of things that we can find common ground. As you know, Terry, the world is a series of Venn diagrams. And if we want to focus on what makes us different, we can focus on that part of the circle that we just, but we can also focus on those overlaps. Yep. And I think that's what I've been trying to do. And I think American politics, too often today, politicians are saying, let's focus on those areas where we disagree. I want to focus on the areas where we agree.
All right, let's go to public education. During your first 4 years, public school education increased by 17%. Republicans and Democrats came together, particularly in your last budget, or the current budget that's operating now. So what's the thrust of the public school education budget?
In this budget?
Yes, sir.
Or throughout my...
No, let's talk about right now.
Well, right now is a continuation of what I've been trying to do before, and that is invest adequately in education, in public education. Actually, and I'm trying to extend it right from zero up through post-secondary education. And I understand you can't just throw money at any problem, but you can't keep taking money away from any problem and hope to get to a good outcome either. So that's the first step. The second step is to make sure that we're doing everything to make that education relevant to the real needs of people in a 21st century economy. And that's what I was trying to do 4 years ago, and that's what I'm trying to do in this budget.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, believe me, I have many more questions for the governor, and we'll take a break. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. My special guest is the Governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf. We're talking about a variety of things in his budget message, and we're going to get to one or two subjects that aren't in the message, but I gotta read this. Here we go. Lowering the compulsory age to start school from 8 to 6, raising the minimum age in which students can drop out of high school from 17 to 18, raising the minimum wage for teachers to $45,000 from whatever it was, $18,000, or is now $18,500. They all seem to fit together as a package, don't they?
Yes, they do. No, and again, I'm trying to make. I think we're one of only 3 states that has a minimum age of 8. Most other states are down at 6 or below. So we need to be competitive. I don't want Pennsylvania, if I'm going out and saying to a company, you ought to come to Pennsylvania, that we're a dynamic state, and they look at, you don't have to go to school till you're 8, and you can leave when you're 17. They say, what kind of state is this? And you have teachers still making, your minimum wage is $18,500. So, and as I said in the speech, this is a funded mandate. So I'm saying to school districts in mostly rural Pennsylvania,
small towns,
I need you to be able to afford to attract good teachers, because I can't afford to have the kids in your area, just because they happen to live in rural areas, not get a good education. So I want to be able to, and so in this budget, as I said, this is a funded mandate.
Sure. When I've been talking about it, I say, now you can't ask someone who taught for as many years as I do to be opposed to raising teachers' salary. I had a little fun. Fun with it. All right. I want to go to a couple of other subjects. Let's start with the minimum wage. As you know, every state around us has a higher minimum wage. Right. Our minimum wage has been $7.25. That's the federal government's minimum wage. 2009. You want to raise it?
Yeah, I do, and I'm proposing this. I proposed a rise in the minimum wage in all the budget addresses. This one is different in that what I'm saying. I'm trying to make the point that the minimum wage, there's a moral component to that, and people shouldn't be making a wage where they work full time if they're working below the poverty level, and that's what $7.25 gets you if you have a family of 4. You go to $12, we can actually say, okay, let's not forget about the moral issue here. We are now, you, a taxpayer, you're now spending hundreds of millions of dollars on public assistance programs.
And other.
So what if I can tell you, let's raise this, and without doing anything else, I can reduce the amount of money that you have to pay for human services, and I can actually increase the compensation coming out of the Department of Human Services to the people who are caring for your mom and dad or your grandparents or your kids at home. And so I'm trying to connect those two things together, that this actually is a more efficient way to do things. And so I think this argument seems to be gaining traction with even the other side.
One other point. lots of rural and small communities can't afford to have their own. They use the state police, and
right.
You've now suggesting another way to fund the state police. I mean, it is a tough problem for rural and small towns.
Sure. Right.
So what do you want to do?
Well, actually, 2 years ago, I started saying, come on,
right.
There is no such thing as a free lunch. And what was happening, and what is happening, is that every municipality says, okay, you're saying I can have my own police force, which I have to pay for, or I can have the state police come in and serve my community for free. Well, the answer is always going to be, I think I'm going to take the free deal.
Right.
It shouldn't be, and it's not really free. What happens is that the money that should have gone to bridges and roads is going to pay for the extra police, and so I'm saying, look, I'm fine if you want to have this cooperative agreement, but it's not free.
Right.
And let's put a dollar value. So I put a nominal value at the first year. This year I'm trying something different. Let's recognize that okay, if you're a small municipality under 1,000, okay, it's still free. 1,000 to 2,000, it's, I forget, $8, maybe then 16. So we scale it up.
So depending on the size of the community.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, we're going to run to a break. I have at least two other big subjects I want to get to. One, severance tax. It wasn't in the proposal, but the governor has recommended that over time. Gun control, he's gotten into that. Not in this budget, but he's talked about that on a number of occasions. We'll get to those subjects after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, Governor Wolf has recommended in each of his budgets shale tax. That's the amount of cubic feet extracted from the fracked wells. Once again, you put it in. But you have a little wrinkle in this in the sense about you want to use it for economic and environmental programs. Take it.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's not in the budget. I separated it. I took it out of the budget. The last 4 times it was in the budget. And this time I said, no, I want this to be separate and apart. We're the only major natural gas producing state in the country without a shale tax. And let's take this, all of the money that we can raise from this, a reasonable tax that was not going to deleteriously affect the industry, and use it for things that actually local municipalities, townships, people need. Good point. So that when their homes are flooded like they have been, I don't have to go out and say, geez, I'm really sorry for your loss. I can say, we have a program here that we can help. We can mitigate this. We can maybe prevent this. If you're in the northern tier or in the urban area, you don't have access to high-speed internet. Right. We have something, this would give us something to do. And it's something that every other state has. We're paying the severance tax to other states when we buy their products. Let them pay for our products, and let us have the state do this rather than have the local municipality and the local taxpayer pay for this.
Look, there are a whole bunch of other things in the budget that we could talk about, but I'm going to skip those and go to something that you've started to stress in the last 6 months or so. I'm not saying you didn't talk about it before, but you stressed it more, and that's gun control. It's not in the budget, but are you going to push for expanding universal background checks, bump stock, ban bump stocks? That's a way to take a semi-automatic weapon and turn it into an automatic weapon. I'm clueless about guns, by the way. It's not my not area I know anything about. Take it. Is that something?
It's something that I care very deeply about, and I think we need, especially here in Pennsylvania, where we have this gun show loophole, universal background checks. I think these are reasonable gun safety. I think Republicans and Democrats alike want to ban bump stocks.
Oh, sure.
I think we ought to go back to where we were and have a ban on military assault weapons. Those are the weapons that are used to kill people.
But we do have a big, now you're from York and I'm from Lancaster, so we know what goes on there in hunting season. We have a lot of people who hunt and a lot people who fish, correct?
It's a religious holiday, first day of deer season.
And you're not talking about it.
No. And I think everybody, in York County I grew up with, recognizes the need for common sense gun safety standards.
Yeah.
That's it.
One thing on the side of business, before I let you go, you're recommending that the corporate net income tax get reduced by 1 percentage point. Reaching out to the business community here, encouraging.
Yeah, well, I've been for that since I was on the Business Tax Reform Commission in 2002.
Oh.
And I have been consistent that at 9.99%. I tried to reduce it my first budget 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been very consistent on this, and this 1% this year, but the idea is to get it down to 5.9%, and broaden the base. That's good tax policy. So you get rid of the loopholes, I'm throwing that out because I want to start with something that what's 10% reduction in the corporate net income tax.
All right, I'm going to give you an assignment. With the next time you come back, we don't have time to do this, but I know it's important to you. Criminal justice reform.
Yes.
It's a huge issue.
Big issue.
With clean slate in here in this state, that I've had people on to talk about that, and we have some other considerations when it comes to criminal justice reform. We have about a minute left. Tell me why that's a big priority for you, and then hopefully you'll come back and we can get into the details.
I'll come back,
on it.
and I think Gene Barr is going to be in here in a future program, and I think he's important. And it's a jobs bill. It's a jobs bill. It's workforce readiness right now.
Right.
We cannot afford to have people come out of prison, pay their dues, and basically say, for the rest of your life, you're going to be on welfare, or you can't.
It's also a fairness issue.
It's a fairness issue. Absolutely.
Thanks for coming on. Okay, we have a couple of the state's leading reporters. They're going to come on the program. They'll join us in a minute. Thank you.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Welcome me, as often is the case, are two of the state's leading journalists, Marc Levy with the Associated Press and Angela Couloumbis with the Philadelphia Inquirer. They're frequent guests on the program. Angela, you've heard the governor. You, of course, followed him throughout the course of his 4 years and then this year's budget address. Were you a little surprised at the response? I mean, even the Republicans seem to say, not very, parts of it they don't agree with, but overall, take it.
Yes, I was actually very surprised. I thought we had entered some sort of alternate reality. Right after the budget speech, Republicans came together and had a press conference, and they basically praised the tone of the governor's speech. They praised the message, or portions of the message. They said that there were some disagreements and there were some other issues they had hoped to hear him address. But overall, it is the first time that I can remember, this is his 5th budget address. Right. It's the first time that I can remember that there was such a positive response, particularly given how divisive it has been in years past.
Yeah, look, the governor is continuing the shift we saw in his first term from taking on the legislature with both fists to trying to sow bipartisanship and agreement and a culture of agreement and compromise and civility, and he's continued that into his second term, even though he wiped the floor with his Republican opponent in the election. He hasn't gone into his second term somehow thinking that he'll overpower a legislature that still has significant Republican majorities. He's looking for common ground, but he does have two sort of parallel proposals on the minimum wage and the Marcellus shale tax
that are going to be controversial.
Those will run into trouble, yes.
Yeah, but the economic development aspects, when you talk about the education funding, I mean, it seems like that's a perfect marriage, as the governor just pointed out, of two things that are interrelated. And by and large, the Republicans, looks like they seem ready to buy into that, or am I...
I think they're very interested in it, and I think that they agree with some of the fundamental principles behind the need for those kinds of programs. I guess really the million-dollar question is how much of an issue are these side non-budget items going to be, like Marcellus Shale. In years past, these types of things have been tied often, or tried to be tied to an ultimate agreement, and that is when you have seen budget negotiations run into trouble.
Run into trouble. One of the things that the governor didn't talk about, but he has sent his lieutenant governor to visit 67 counties. I smile when visiting 67 Pennsylvania counties. Senator Specter used to do that. Try to do that over the summer months. That's not easy. But that's one thing that the governor hasn't said he's for. His lieutenant governor is definitely for it. That may have be a rough sell in the legislature. Yeah,
legalizing marijuana, even in the 10 states that it's been authorized in, had to go to a voter referendum. And in Pennsylvania, there's no direct access to the ballot for voters. So with the legislature the gatekeeper to the state's laws, legislatures everywhere have resisted legalizing marijuana, except for one state. So your polls show that it's popular.
Popular,
there's a lot of growers, people with land who would love to grow it instead of, say, tobacco or another crop that may see diminishing returns.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a couple of things I talked to the governor about. It seems, and again, Republicans, minimum wage, I mean, that's going to be a tough sell, isn't it?
It is. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that he has talked about raising the minimum wage every single year since he became governor, and particularly in the context of the budget. I honestly don't know if at this point there is any room for compromise. What I've heard,
not even something like $10 or $10.25 or something like that.
There have been some Republicans who have pushed for a smaller increase.
Yeah, so it's quite possible that a minimum wage bill would pass if it was given the floor vote. The problem is that Republicans will not bring it to the floor if a majority of their caucus doesn't agree with it. And the majority of their caucus so far has not agreed with it, even though you can get 10, 15, 20% of the Republican caucus to join with Democrats on it.
All right, we have about a minute left. The shale tax. He's put that, it's not in the budget, but it's popular with the voters. But
I think he's hoping that it's going to be more palatable now because he's tying it to something different. In other words, the money's not going into this general pot of money for the state to spend. It's going towards specific projects in districts that might get some legislator buy-in. I don't know that it will be, given how divisive the issue has been and how divided everybody has been on this.
Yeah, particularly rural and small towns. I mean, some of the projects he talked about, that would likely fill the bill with the money.
And projects like these are traditionally, popular with Republicans, so it's quite possible that they will counter that with a separate funding source, not a Marcellus Shale tax.
All right, as always, thank you for coming on. You'll be on future programs as always. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.